I'm a philosopher who is interested primarily in understanding religion, the social sciences, and history. This means I'm working in a variety of different fields that come together, and in a sort of simple-minded way, complexity is a natural consequence of that. Now, my particular interest is in calling into question certain sorts of methodological approaches to the study of religion and society generally. And one way that I do that is by beginning from what is most complex. And what I take to be most complex pretty much in the universe are human beings. They start with a brain, which is just about as complex as it gets. I think it's safe to say that there's nothing else that's been discovered in the universe that's more complex in its nature and structure than the human brain. And then the individual human is informed by a variety of experiences, beginning probably from the time just before it's born. And those experiences add to the complexity of the individual human being. When that individual human being is inserted into or incorporated into a social order, beginning with the family, then spreading out into larger orders of various sorts, it becomes even more complex and even more difficult to predict in anything like a mechanical or a mathematical way. Some of the material we've been working on this year has allowed me to at least begin the process of interpreting for other philosophers of social sciences, other humanists, the way in which chaos and complexity have emerged in the natural sciences and in the physical sciences. In a sense, part of what I'm seeing, the more that I come to understand this material, is that the complexity that's already apparent and recognizable in the human being is there at the subhuman levels as well. And as our colleague Steve has already remarked, if you can't get laws in those areas above force equals mass times acceleration and Schrodinger equations, we ought not to think that we're going to get anything like laws, maybe not even very regular rules of thumb when we're talking about individual or collective human beings, individuals in collectives. Add to this another component of what I'm interested in, and that's the change in ethics between, let's say, 1200 and the present. So a mere, 800 years. And in that period of time, we've gone from, and I'm talking only of Western Europe and the United States here, my expertise doesn't extend beyond that. But we've gone from a social world which took seriously the notion of God and powers greater than human beings, a kind of teleology of the cosmos that is evident in what in the Middle Ages would have been talked about as God's providential order. And then in various parts of Western Europe and the Americas, those notions have undergone rather dramatic change. Not only was there the diremption of European spiritual life brought about by what we've come to call the Protestant Revolution, but the transformation of the different religions as they've encountered non-Western religions in the West has changed the way that people have thought about different powers and the telos of human societies. So, for example, when Europeans got to the Western Hemisphere, they encountered societies that had radically different views about how to understand those powers that are, how to deal with those powers, what sorts of relations we had or they had with those powers. And that became even more complex as the Europeans moved west. Not only the Native Americans of the northeastern woodlands, but the the Southern Plains, the Pacific Northwest, all of these became part and parcel of what these groups had to deal with. And then from the 17th century on, there was an influx into the European consciousness of at least secondhand versions of the religions of the South Asian subcontinent and of East Asia, China and Japan. All of these changed the way that people believed in dramatic ways and changed the opportunities for belief that people had in dramatic ways. Part of what I've argued in print is that given this level of complexity and given the way that different opportunities and different ways of understanding ourselves have emerged over this 800-year period, right, it's not surprising that ethics and the study of the social sciences resist anything like laws, resist, for example, economic reductions of societies to what, at least back in the 1970s and 80s, was thought of as economic man, the sort of utilitarian, rational agent. If you actually believe that there are a variety of other powers in the world that you have to take into account in the way you organize your life, then there are going to be so many different versions of utility that you might as well write that out of, your analysis.